Barnaby Bigglesworth, a man who considered Hugh Hefner his spirit animal, admired his reflection. Always a hit with the ladies, Barnaby prided himself on his charm and his ability to, as he eloquently put it, score. Tonight was no different. He straightened his bow tie, a mischievous glint in his eye.
"Looking good, Bigglesworth,"
he muttered to his reflection, flashing a winning smile. He exited his penthouse apartment, the city lights twinkling below like a sea of fallen stars. Barnaby had a date with destiny, or at least destiny in the form of a bubbly blonde he'd met at a gala the week prior. Little did he know his string of conquest was about to hit a very sticky, very small snag. Barnaby's mind raced. Was this a dream? A prank? He pinched himself hard. The pain that shot up his arm confirmed this was, unfortunately, his reality. He was a grown man trapped inside a toddler's body. He tried to speak, to shout for help, but the only sound that emerged was a garbled "Wah!" Tears welled up, blurring his vision. He was a prisoner in his own body, a terrifying thought that sent shivers down his now diminutive spine. The sound of his penthouse door opening startled him. He turned, his little legs wobbling beneath him, and came face to face with the woman from the gala, the blonde bombshell he'd charmed the week before. Except her perfectly manicured eyebrows were currently arched in a mixture of surprise and amusement.
Well, 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 look what the cat dragged in. Or should I say what the cradle rocked out?
Panic seized Barnaby. He tried to speak, to explain, but the only sounds he could manage were frustrated gurgles and whimpers. He pointed at himself, then at his clothes, which now hung on his shrunken frame like a badly fitting costume. The woman, whose name he suddenly remembered was Cassandra, chuckled, her laughter like the tinkling of broken glass.
Oh, poor baby, can't quite find your words.
She reached out and patted his head, her touch sending a strange mix of warmth and dread through him. He wanted to shrink away from her, to run and hide, but his legs felt like jelly.
Don't worry, darling, I think I can translate.
Cassandra lowered herself onto the plush carpet, her elegant evening gown spilling around her like a pool of moonlight. She crossed her legs, her gaze never leaving Barnaby.
You're wondering what happened, aren't you, sweetie?
Barnaby, still struggling to comprehend the situation, could only nod mutely, his eyes wide and fearful.
Let's just say you've been a very, very bad boy.
She leaned closer, her breath warm on his cheek.
That little concoction I slipped into your drink last week? A special blend, designed just for you, darling.
Barnaby's eyes widened in horror. He remembered the strange, slightly bitter taste in his cocktail that night. He'd dismissed it at the time, attributing it to a poorly made drink. Now the truth hit him like a ton of bricks. Cassandra had drugged him.
I call it karma in a cocktail. It seems your little game of hearts has finally caught up with you, hasn't it, Barnaby?
She reached out and gently pinched his cheek, her touch sending a wave of humiliation washing over him.
Don't worry, darling. You'll have plenty of time to think about your actions. Plenty of time in diapers, that is.
The next few days were a blur of humiliation and despair. Barnaby, once a master of the universe, was now at the mercy of Cassandra.
Time for your bath, sweetie, she'd chirp, scooping him up with surprising strength.
She bathed him, diapered him, and spoke to him in that same syrupy sweet tone that set his teeth on edge.
He'd find himself submerged in a mountain of bubbles, his dignity shrinking faster than his body.
You know, Barnaby, Cassandra would say, her voice echoing off the marble tiles of his luxurious bathroom, you're actually quite adorable like this. No more sharp words, no more wandering hands.
He wanted to retort, to tell her exactly what he thought of her and her karma in a cocktail, but the words wouldn't come. He could only splash and gurgle in frustration, his anger as impotent as his... Well, let's just say a certain part of him had definitely seen better days. She often teased him about its size and how limp it was. As the days turned into weeks, Barnaby began to understand the true extent of his predicament. Cassandra had no intention of reversing the effects of the drug. This, she made it abundantly clear, was his punishment.
You see, Barnaby, she explained one afternoon as she spoon-fed him pureed peas, you men have had it too good for too long. You use women, discard them, and then move on to the next conquest without a second thought.
She wiped a stray pea from his chin, her touch surprisingly gentle.
It's time you learned what it's like to be vulnerable, to be treated as an object rather than a person.
Barnaby, his mouth full of mushy peas, could only glare at her. He hated to admit it, even to himself, but her words struck a chord. Had he been callous in the past? Selfish? Perhaps. One evening, as Cassandra read him a bedtime story, Barnaby decided to attempt communication.
Cassandra, he stammered, his tongue feeling thick and clumsy in his mouth.
It came out as more of a gurgle than actual words. Cassandra paused, a flicker of surprise crossing her features.
Yes, Barnaby? She asked softly.
He took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of his diminished willpower.
Sorry, he managed to sputter out, his cheeks flushing crimson.
Cassandra's eyebrows shot up to her perfectly arched hairline.
Sorry, she echoed, her voice a mixture of disbelief and amusement. Did the little man-child finally learn how to apologize?
Barnaby ignored her barb and continued, his voice gaining a sliver of strength with each word.
Sorry, used women, he mumbled, his head bowed in shame. Wrong, I was wrong.
Cassandra stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Barnaby held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Had he finally gotten through to her? Was there a chance, however small, that she might release him from this infantile prison? A slow smile spread across Cassandra's face, but this time it wasn't the cruel, mocking smile he'd come to dread. This smile held a hint of warmth, a glimmer of something akin to forgiveness?
Well, she murmured, her voice softer than usual. It seems our Barnaby has finally started learning his lesson.
She leaned down and kissed him on the forehead, her lips lingering for a moment.
Don't worry, darling, she whispered. Every few years you'll grow a little bit. Who knows? Maybe by next century you'll be back to an adult age, if I allow it.
She winked, and for the first time since his transformation, Barnaby felt a flicker of hope. It was a tiny spark, easily extinguished, but it was there nonetheless. He had a long way to go, a lot to atone for, but maybe, just maybe, he could emerge from this experience a changed man. Many long decades later, Barnaby Bigglesworth was almost back to his old self. Almost. He still had a few inches to grow, and his voice occasionally cracked, betraying the high-pitched squeak it had been only months before. But the experience had changed him profoundly. Gone was the arrogant playboy, the man who treated women like disposable accessories. In his place stood a humbler, kinder Barnaby, a man who had stared into the abyss of his own shallowness and emerged, blinking, into the light. He still woke up in a cold sweat sometimes, the memory of his time as a diaper-clad toddler. But instead of fear, he now felt gratitude. Gratitude for the harsh lesson, for the opportunity to change, to become a better version of himself. And Cassandra? She was gone now, vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a faint scent of her signature perfume and a life lesson Barnaby would never forget. Her own beauty never faded, and she left only a note wishing him good luck. He never saw her again, but he often thought of her, especially when he passed a mirror and caught a glimpse of his own reflection. He was a teenager, but in today's world. A young man with wisdom beyond his youthful appearance. He no longer saw the cocky playboy, but a man marked by experience, a man who had learned that karma, like a diaper change, eventually catches up to everyone.